And we're live. Thank you guys for joining us here at Pursuit of Purpose for another episode of What Are We Doing? I'm Rob.
I'm Chuck.
And we are very proud to have allowed us to become a part of the pursuit of your purpose. On today's episode, we're going to discuss feelings of inadequacy that seem to be quite heightened during the holiday season, oftentimes.
Yes.
So what does it mean? What does it mean to feel inadequate? Well, I think a real simple way to put it is to feel like you're not enough.
Yes.
That you don't have enough.
Right.
You can't do enough. Right?
Right.
So what does that mean to you, Chuck? What does it mean to feel inadequate?
Well, I think it first comes from that source that you just mentioned, which is in my mind, I set this measure, this bar, if you will.
Right.
And I'm looking for all of the evidence, not just the tangible evidence. I want to feel it. Maybe even looking for feedback about it. And when I'm not getting that, then I start seeing this difference. I'm lower than where I ideally want to be. But what I haven't yet realized is I set that up. I made that happen. I created this inadequate experience, which I hope we get to talk more about today.
So what it sounds like you're saying is that it's almost like the inadequacy is not real, that you actually made it up.
Yes.
You created the understanding or the concept, the paradigm. We like that word around here.
Right.
We created this idea that's not necessarily grounded in reality.
Right.
But it's just a thought, a concept of ourselves that we are some way failing, that we're not enough, that we're smaller than the task at hand.
Yes. And I think that this is a little more global. We're going to talk about the holidays because we're kind of in that season right now. But I think folks who do that probably do that on lots of different areas. They do it as parents. They do it on their job. They do it in other areas where they have put this expectation on themselves and they've already decided they're going to come up short.
Isn't that sad?
It is.
To have just a predetermined, self-imposed destination of failure.
Yes.
That is really sad.
Right.
So what do you think's a practical way, and not the practical way, but a practical way to counterbalance that, to come against that?
Well, and I think counterbalance is one of my favorite terms, which I use a lot in our work. And oftentimes I use the evidence first. I said, well, tell me what's happening. And when they start, breaking down in this particular situation, maybe they're having upset moments. They think nobody appreciates them. Things aren't coming together. So there's just, one more piece of evidence to qualify this wrong idea that they already had to begin with. And so as that pendulum starts pushing more and more toward the negative, we get the privilege of asking, well, what was the origin of that?
Right.
Where did that even come from? And so then next thing you know, we're getting into their own idea of, say, some family history, maybe going back to their childhood that they feel like they have to replicate. And my kids have to have at least that, if not better. And all this pressure gets put on. And so you got this vast swing between unreasonable expectations and overreactions. So then once we can confront that and they realize, and that's not even realistic, then we start narrowing the swing. Then it starts coming down. But one thing has to happen after another. Then we start modifying the expectations.
So there's another fascinating aspect to this, and I'm wondering your take on it. So what if somebody doesn't even realize that what they feel is a concept of inadequacy? They identify it as sadness, or they identify it as maybe they feel depressed, but they don't even really realize that it originated in this feeling of I'm not enough, right. This feeling of I'm inadequate.
Right. And so usually what I like to do is I ask them, I said, who's telling you that? Who told you that you were inadequate? Who tould you that you are not enough? Or that
so what's your source of this information?
What's the source of this information? And now they have to come up with a person. And because they're for sure not going to say, a website or, some other influencer maybe on television, because they know that already sounds kind of too much. But they may come up with a person, and maybe it's a parent or an in-law or a spouse or their kids who don't seem to appreciate everything they're doing, whomever, they're going to, and so then we start qualifying that person. So tell me what that person has said. And oftentimes that person didn't say anything.
So that's a fascinating thing. And what if, so let's say that, I mean, a lot of us are married, we have significant others, or we have family members. What if you see your family member struggling with this and you can tell that they feel inadequate? They're suffering from whatever experience it may have led them that way, but they have this overall feeling of less than. Overall, they seem to be headed towards depression. How could you empathetically, as a family member or significant other, how could you help them? How could you be a bridge to a better experience?
I think one of the first best things is to do what we like to do, which is just start becoming curious. You really seem to be pretty uptight this morning, or you seem to be upset. Is something coming up short? Like, are you expecting something? I mean, I start becoming curious. But
so wait a minute, hold on. You're telling me that me telling my wife to calm down isn't going to fix it?
It may manifest something, but I don't think it's going to manifest what you want. And Rob couldn't join us on the show today because I think he is at the hospital.
Both eyes were swollen shut.
Yes, right. And he's not very coherent. It must have been the frying pan to the head.
Right.
Correct. I don't think that one's going to work. But I do like the curiosity, and that may not work well either, but it may work better than the telling.
So what you're saying is ask them questions that are yes, driven towards extracting out of them, get them to talk about how they feel. Yes. So you wouldn't say, hey, what's wrong with you? Is that a qualified question?
It's almost as bad as let me tell you what's wrong.
Yeah.
I like to think, I guess in all seriousness, if I ask a question, try to find a little bit of evidence. Maybe they're tearful and you go, oh, I see that you're crying this morning. What seems to have you upset? Use what you see, not what you suppose.
Right.
Because you're probably sitting over there in the living room watching them just tie themselves into knots. And you're thinking, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. What are you doing? But if I ask it that way, I'm not going to get an honest answer. There's no way. But if I give them just a little nugget of evidence, you look tearful, you look stressed, or you seem to be scattered. You just mentioned 8 things you have to do, and you said it in less than 45 seconds. I got to do this. I got to do this. Like, oh, your mind seems to be very busy on this morning.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden they're like, wow, it is busy. But that's that little crack in that crust.
There are some hot button words, and you kind of alluded to there. One of them being when you hear someone say or express the meaning of "I'm overwhelmed," that would be something that would indicate they're headed towards feelings of inadequacy.
Yes,
wouldn't that be true?
Right.
And when someone says I'm overwhelmed, that's an indication they're saying I feel inadequate. So then, how could you lead them towards a simplistic balance to that feeling of overwhelmed?
I like to say, if I had an idea as to what are you going for? Where are we heading here? How do you want that dinner to go? How do you want the decorations to look? And it doesn't really matter what they say. They're having to break down away from the emotion that they hope to get from their perfect decorations or the perfect meal, and actually break it down. And the more they think about it, the hope is they'll come to realize, man, that doesn't even, I don't even think that's doable.
Right.
I just cook the meat, pull out the pies, then the next phase would be, well, how can I help? And that also causes the stressed out person to break it down a little bit more, because now they're having to get out of their head and be instructional and give directives. Yes. And boy, the minute those directives start coming out, then they realize lots of things. First of all, they probably are overwhelming their own plate first. And then the second thing is now they're going to have to delegate. And that's not easy for control people. I hate to use that term, but boy, y'all know we are.
And it's a fascinating thing. The more people get into a feeling of anxiety and experience of anxiety, the more controlling they seem to want to become oftentimes, because that anxiety actually makes them feel out of control.
Yes.
internally. So they work to attempt to control their external circumstances.
Yes.
Which in turn makes everything worse.
Always.
Yeah.
And I say always, now we use absolute terms sparingly on a lot of our work, but that is so true.
Yeah.
There is no other way of looking at it. And what is it that they're actually trying to control? Are they actually trying to control the events or control the outcome? And what is it about the outcome? That was my expectation question. Like, what are you going for here? And I just want everybody to be happy and have a real good time. Like, well, that's sweet. What do you want them to experience to have that happiness? Now all of a sudden they're stuttering with their answer. When really the clean, most pure, most beautiful answer is, I just want to get everybody together. I just want everybody to be together if we can do it. All the other little details, that's a setup for that failure. And our failure word today is inadequacy.
So it's a fascinating thing. I mean, a lot of the stuff we talked about here has been things that like we referenced relationships, we referenced family gatherings. Last week we talked about our commercial trappings of the holiday season and how that, it would be so much more productive if we focused on making memories instead of making purchases.
Yes.
Well, that ties into this week. And here's how I kind of envision that tying in. As a man, and many times as a woman, we consider ourselves to be the provider.
Yes.
The person who is responsible for the provisions, not only of the day-to-day life, but also the provisions of happiness in the holidays.
Yes.
It's our responsibility to make everybody come together and be happy.
Right.
It's all us. We have to make it happen.
Right.
Right.
We're the producers.
And then part of that is we have to produce enough money to make it all happen.
Yeah. Yes.
We have to produce the finances.
Right.
To make it big enough, to make it fancy enough, to make it, all the gifts have to be what everybody wants. Everything has to be just right. The house has to be decorated. The lights have to be right. The trees have to be right.
The food,
everything about it.
Yes.
So as a man, we oftentimes, or at least I do, I don't know how to express my feelings. That F word, there are many 4-letter words, and feel is one of them.
Yes.
For us men especially,
Yes.
and that word becomes profanity in my mind. I don't want to feel vulnerable by expressing that I feel inadequate.
Right.
So then I keep it to myself, and I'll find myself frustrated or angry about anything that's not even related.
Right.
And I may lash out at my wife. I may lash out at my kids. I may lash out at my coworker. Who knows what it may be? But I feel that it is our responsibility to take deep stock of ourselves and be honest.
Yes.
About how we truly do feel, especially as men, because so oftentimes we're taught not to use that F word.
Right.
Not to believe in that F word.
Right.
But the feelings of inadequacy, especially at this time of year, are real. Those feelings are real. They're not made up. They're not a fantasy.
Right.
Even though the concept of it may not be in truth.
Yes.
The feelings are real.
Right.
And there's no shame in experiencing feelings and asking for help. Asking for someone just to be an ear to listen.
Yes.
There's no harm in that, is there?
None at all.
As long as we're not doing it in an attacking way or blaming anyone else for how we feel.
Right. Which is when we try to get other people to overcompensate.
Exactly.
Not looking for that. I'm just looking for a listen.
So what would be a good way for, let's say that a man or a woman, but I mean, as a man myself, I'm going to relate to the gentleman out there. So y'all forgive me for a minute. Let's say a man, he goes to work every day. He comes home every day. And all on his mind, on his drive home, is all the things he wants to do for his family.
Yes.
And how he feels like he's not enough. He doesn't have enough. He can't make enough. Sure, he may have enough throughout the year to pay the bills, but here we come in on Christmas time, he's responsible to produce more.
Right. Right. That extraordinary.
He didn't get any more money.
No.
He just took on the extra responsibility to be the provider of gifts, food, and circumstances for the holidays.
Right.
That's a heavy burden.
It can be for these men.
For men or women.
Women, yeah.
But men typically just don't talk about their feels as much.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So what would be a good way for a man to coach himself into opening up a little bit about that?
Yes.
How could we do that?
I love the challenge, especially to our men who are listening, because we know we get there, and we get there definitely during the holiday time, and maybe there's other times too. But this is a big investing time, if you will, big purchasing
absolutely.
time. Lots of that extraordinary drain on the resources we have. So one of the things I often like folks who, I think the fellows will like this, is let's get your directives down. Where is it that you ideally want to go, and how do you ideally want to get there?
Yeah.
And so once you break that down, once you write it down, and I say write it down, we're big writers on this show, write it down and look at it, and then use the best of your dude skills to say, is that even reasonable? Is that even a reasonable pursuit? Yeah. And then we get into how much energy am I willing to spend to get there?
Right.
That's financial energy, emotional energy, and those sorts of things. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. And it definitely doesn't have to be work till I break down. That doesn't make any sense. So once I see it, and that's kind of how we are. Once how many times have we put things together? We've talked about that before on our shows. I'm going to assemble this table. Well, if I could see a picture of it, I'm likely I could get there probably without the directions, because now I generally know where I'm going. So let's get the image going first. Then we'll talk about what the expenses to get there, the financial, emotional, mental energy to get there. There's going to be buildup, so there has to be release. Now, where are we going to go for that? Who do we talk to for that? And ideally, it's your best partner. That could be spouse or whomever, but maybe they're probably in just as much, if not a worse condition as you. So let's see if we can't counter that with somebody else. If there's not men in your life, that's kind of what guys like us are. Call and say, okay, let us ask the effective questions. Because if your friend came to you and they're already, that energy's built up, but it's not being released, boy, you ask one or two effective questions as to, well, how do you think you got to this point? And out comes all of this stuff. This guy gets to talk about all the pressures of being a dad. He's going to feel better. And that's our goal. Our goal is to get him toward better.
So then one of the biggest elements is just to find that key that unlocks the door to him being able to express.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And man, so often, like especially at this time of year, and we find ourselves and our loved ones turning to unhealthy habits.
Yes.
To escape the way we feel. We might turn to drink. We might turn to pills. We might turn to sleep. Mm-hmm. We might turn to social media.
Yes.
We might turn to just the addiction of distraction.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever form that may take.
Right.
We may just find ourselves in a constant state of looking for something to distract us. Who knows what it might be? Binge watching TV.
Right.
Who knows what it is? Shopping.
Yes.
Well, go ahead.
Well, one of the things that has happened as you and I've had these conversations with other folks throughout the years, and those things you were just describing are relief-driven behaviors. And the problem is people go to those in the middle of the process. Well, wait a minute, the process isn't done yet. Christmas isn't here yet. So why don't we devise the best possible plan for this year? Next year can always be better. Let's get through that event. Let's get through the holiday. Let's have that Christmas morning, maybe the day after. And then instead of release or relief, then we'll go to reward. Now you have some time left in hopefully your break before you go back to work. Let's go do something completely different. Let's reward ourselves. Hey, we got through that. Now let's go do something for us. Maybe just you, or get together with a couple of fellas, go sit in the woods somewhere, go do something where you can say, this is my reward for my hard work.
Well, that's amazing. So what you've done then is you've taken your body from the stress. What is the hormone that the body releases in stress? Cortisol. So, and what does cortisol do?
It's an inflammant. It
causes your immune system to shut down. Mm-hmm. It causes your body to stop healing itself.
Yes.
It makes you go into reserve mode, reserve energy, reserve everything. And it takes away your ability and drive to be active.
Yes.
So then if you can associate a reward Then you release oxytocin.
Yes.
Then you release serotonin.
Right.
Then you release, what's the other one? There's another one. It's the one.
Yeah.
So you get the 3 positives.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can store the memory, the chemical memory of all those positive feelings that came with the reward of completing,
Right.
the reward of getting past the stress.
Yes.
And see, what we've done so often, especially during the holiday season, is we just try to survive the season.
Yes.
We find a way to escape the distraction, the chemical stuff, whatever it may be. We've never allowed ourselves to build a positive memory without the stress.
Right.
So we just want to survive the holiday season, get through it until next year.
Yes.
But then when next year comes, all we've done is compounded the horror of all the years prior, because we've never solved the problem.
Right.
We've never gotten past the feeling of inadequacy.
Right.
We've just built on it and put it aside until next time.
And that makes the fear factor that much more. That's another one of those F words. That makes the fear factor that much more great, because we never processed it. You know, you and I have been involved with different projects before, and some of it's with, different organizations we're involved in. And usually there's an event season. Like, for example, I've done Christian youth camp for over 30 plus years, and there's a week, and I mean you're losing sleep every night. There's activities every day, but you know what you're getting into. By the time we get to the end of the week, we're spent. It's like the day after Christmas. We're spent. So what we started doing was getting back together, not the next week, no less than a month away.
Yeah.
And then we now we do it digitally, but at the time we didn't quite have that. So we would go meet at somebody's house, maybe in a central location, as many of the counselors that could gather. And we asked ourselves a series of effective questions. What went well? What could have gone better? And that way, and when we started doing that, by the next year, 2, 3, 4 years into this thing, it was smooth. I mean, it was still a stressful week just because of the other obvious factors. We're losing sleep every night. We're burning a lot of energy. It's super hot, but it went better. So that's what I suggest folks do. Sometime near February, maybe just get your notes back out. Take some notes. Just here or there. You'll remember what they were, but don't think about them for a good solid 4 to 5 weeks, and then pull them out, and then just go over them and say, now, 11 months from now, 10 to 11 months from now, this is what I intend on doing to make this go better. Not immediately, because I'm still jacked up a little bit.
Yeah.
I got this terrible counterbalance between, the desires I hope to meet and the inadequacies. We're still in that self-evaluating mode, but wait till you can come back with a clear mind.
So the hope is to build small,
yes,
but effective systems.
Yes.
Small.
Yes.
Nothing huge, nothing that creates havoc in your life, nothing that you have to keep up with, but small, effective systems that you can adopt as a new habit.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And replace the old habit of layer upon layer of stressor, cortisol releasing, fear invoking, horror
feeling.
Well, we're wanting to build some good feelings. We'll want to associate the F word with something positive. So, guys, I mean, we would love to hear from y'all. If there's any topics that you want to discuss, we appreciate our audience. We're here for you. Without you, this serves no purpose.
Right.
So we will see you guys again next Tuesday at the same time in the same place. And we'd love to have some feedback from you in the meantime and in between time. Any requests that you might have for us to discuss, we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah.
So we look forward to it. Thank you again for allowing us to become a part of the pursuit of your purpose. And thank you for joining us for another episode of What Are We Doing? So I'm Rob.
I'm Chuck.
Y'all have a great day and a great holiday season. We'll see you next Tuesday.